So I was going to start here with this thing, which is technically not Brusa, but also is perhaps the first Brusa. Mm-hmm. So this what I'm holding here is the first iteration of some of the circuits that we used in Strega, right? Mm-hmm. So you and I had discussed, we were in your much smaller studio in Berlin, and you were telling me different things that you were excited about and showing me some different pedals and just different circuits that you were excited about. And I think the idea with doing a module, even though we were talking about doing a standalone, a Strega, we did this module just to kick things off because I thought that it would be a little easier to work a few pieces at a time.
Yeah.
So we started with the echo verb, as I call it, which is kind of the central timbre shaping and time shaping circuits, the time filter experiment. So we started with the echo verb, and that is what this little module is. Mm-hmm. And I sent 2 of these to you, I think?
2. I think 2 at different times. Like there was the first one and the second one.
So I sent these prototypes to Alessandro, and if you look here on the back, it's got his name on it so that he knew.
With a little Strega hat.
With a little Strega hat. And so I think one thing that might be kind of interesting would be to think about, if you can remember, when you were first patching this initial prototype module. And again, at this point, this is not Brusa. We weren't even planning on doing the module. We were going to do a standalone, but we just wanted a simple way to get started, and making a module and then having some other things to patch into it would inform us on how to build out the rest of the Strega voice.
Yeah.
But perhaps you could think back. I know, for example, Rob Lowe visited your studio and you patched this module with him. Yeah. This sort of pre-Brusa, pre-Strega module. Is there anything that stands out to you from that time period?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, I think another thing to remember is that when we started getting together and talking about stuff, the idea of the PT as a chip as being the center is also, I think, the reason for you to start with this. Because, I mean, I think you spent a lot of time in trying to get away from, try to integrate what I liked about the PT on pedals that I liked, and expand it in a way that was more malleable, that was more playable, and less just about the noise of the clock, and which were aspects that I really enjoyed, but a lot of it was the manuality, and try to include that in it. So when I got it, as I thought I knew already I was going to do, is feed it something super simple, because the idea was, I mean, how can it dress up or mutate something in a way that I feel like it's interesting, that speaks to my aesthetic, and it could speak to the aesthetic of others. And so I remember plugging it in the first time and just literally running stuff through it, which I did for the Brusa prototype this week as well.
Yeah.
Like something very simple, and see how it can enrich something extremely simple.
Right.
In a way that it's not intrusive in the sense, it's something completely different that doesn't connect to the source material, but more as in, how does it give it a character that it doesn't have, that I can choose how much or how little I want. And so this was the first feedback that I got, sonic feedback that I got from the prototype. It just really felt like it catered to that sort of sonic aesthetic that I was very attached to, in a way that was much more malleable and influenced by my hands, as opposed to set and forget. You know what I mean? So I really, really enjoyed that. And then obviously the fact that I had 2 of them allowed me to play around and sort of see what it sounded like if one went into the other and whatnot, you know, and hear the differences. But it also another confirmation that we were onto something, not only to be considered as a collaboration and our thing, when Rob Lowe came over and played with it, I realized that the results, like the things that Rob was getting out of it, were completely different from things that I would get out of it, which made me really hopeful and excited to hear more of that, which is why when we did the Strega, we had more artists involved, and in that album, the Strega album. Because it really feels like it's a sonic realm that a lot of people have taken and made theirs, as opposed to, this is just, Cortini in a box. It's not, I've never seen it like that. I think a lot of effort, it's not like it came out like something that a lot of people can use. It's just a lot of effort was put for it to feel very dear to me sonically, but very malleable to other people's aesthetic, you know what I mean? As long as they like noise.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so then we developed the Strega voice, and I think that further shapes the sounds you get from Strega. But then what's interesting is that this week we came back around full circle to this. This is the Brusa, and it's obviously very similar. You can see where it comes from. And so I'll ask you again, what were your initial thoughts? Having spent several years now playing Strega, you played, I think you said like 30 shows?
30 shows so far, probably just as many down the pipeline in the future, yeah. Just with 2 Stregas and 2 no controls. 2
Stregas, 2 no controls, so you've used the Strega in a lot of environments. You're sort of improvising these, you are improvising these shows every night with 2 Stregas, 2 Zero Coast. And the response has been very good. I've even had people getting in touch with me over email or social media direct messages saying, hey, I just saw Cortini last night. All he was using was 2 Stregas and 2 no controls. And
can you send him something more? Can you give him something more?
People were just overwhelmingly very happy with the results and really enjoying the shows. And enough so that they're like getting in touch with me about it, which says something. So having spent all this time with Strega, now we're coming back around full circle to a module again, which we hadn't really, we had sort of discussed it, but it was never like a concrete plan.
Or a priority,
exactly. Yeah. And so we're doing this Brusa, and I can tell you when I first plugged in the Brusa and started playing with the prototype, so I had it sort of, obviously you can sort of work with it on this one, and it's just very different though.
Yeah.
Because this is so much early. There was a lot of changes from this to the Strega, and then from Strega to Brusa, there was changes. And when I first plugged this in, I was surprised how different it sounded from the Strega, for me. And maybe it's because I was plugging different things into it. Morphogene, Spectrophone, just a basic STO. One thing that was funny, when you tested it, he just took a cycling channel of a maths and patched it in. That's how he did his test. I said, can you listen, spend some time with this, listen to it, see if it's in the ballpark of where you'd like it to be. We're in my studio. He says, okay, great, get me a maths. And he plugs a maths in and uses one channel to modulate it, and then one channel as the audio signal, and then there's 2 CV outs here, and you patch those around, and you were getting some great sounds.
Yeah, we had like the weird sort of like a 303 thing going on.
Right. Yeah, right out of the gate. So yeah, I guess all this is a long way of asking you, when you first patched the Brusa this week, did you have different, what was feeling different to you from the Strega you're so used to, or from this original prototype module?
Yeah, well, it didn't feel like any of them. It felt like the progression, essentially. It felt like the prototype got us to Strega, and then almost the module went back after visiting Strega. It felt like a lot of the changes that happened from the prototype Eurorack module to Brusa were informed, obviously, by our experiences and our learnings from Strega. So it felt more like a Strega's, little daughter, you know what I mean? And but definitely different. It does. I think part of it is just the format, the fact that obviously now we're introducing this in the world of Eurorack, which makes it easier to integrate, to bring this flavor into a bigger environment
Yeah.
or a smaller one. Like I usually test with very simple setups, but I think it allows you to use that aesthetic differently. That's, I think, the advantage more than trying to think how much of the Strega can be done with this. It's two different things, but at heart they have the same sonic, color in a way.
Yeah.
So it did feel different, even though what I would say is that I was applying different approaches or different dosages of control to reach a similar sonic environment like I would on the Strega. I think the advantage of being able to just drop it into a system that you have and have it interact with other elements as opposed to the Strega, which is a self-contained environment, will open it up to new applications and new colors, new experiences, which I think is the advantage of having it in a Eurorack format.
Right. It's making me think about how there's always this trend, especially in Eurorack, of picking one element of a well-known or well-loved synthesizer and making that into a module. For example, somebody might take
the EMS stuff, they've done that with the
exactly.
trapezoid.
They might take the filter, the Synthi filter, or the Wasp filter, and make a module of it, and then you'll always see this response where someone will say something along the lines of, "Well, but it doesn't sound anything like a Synthi," and well, of course not, because it's just the filter.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I like about this,
it's a little bit more than that.
It is a little bit more, but it also doesn't sound like a Strega to me.
No.
Because it's not a Strega. It's not all the elements of a Strega. It's some of the elements. And I do think in some ways it's leading me to get sounds that I don't ever get with the Strega.
100%. Yeah.
And so I think instead of saying, well, it doesn't sound enough like a Strega, what I'm thinking is, wow, it's really great that this sounds different from a Strega.
Yeah.
It's in the same, obviously, it's in the same lineage.
Yeah. It comes from the Strega.
But you end up in different places. You're using it differently. It's in a modular environment, so you're probably going to patch more, a wider variety of things into it, both the audio input and the CV inputs. Additionally, you're probably going to patch these CV outputs potentially out to other parts of your patch.
Yeah.
Something I was doing was patching these CVs both to the filter or absorb, but then also patching them to a timbral input on the XPO. So I'm sort of using Brusa to influence what's coming into Brusa. It's almost like adding another feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a positive side effect of kind of snipping something out of an instrument and making it into a module.
I agree.
You might end up in some new places. You're definitely not going to get the exact sound of the original instrument, but maybe that's not the point.
For that, no, it's exactly. I don't think it's the point. I mean, at that point, you have the instrument if you want it.
Exactly.
I think it allows you to take that main core, and simply put the main core of the Strega, which is, obviously the PT-based array of echoes, and bring it into an environment without having to make too much power adaptation or bring the voice into place or an envelope or, the agitation circuit and whatnot. So I think people will enjoy being able to extrapolate that soul and put it in their own, in their own environment. It also makes it a little bit more, a little bit less intense when it comes to how is it going to modify the sound. You know what I mean? Because you're actually dropping it into a bigger environment as opposed to a voice, a filter, and a delay, a voice and a delay, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and from the design perspective, there's quite a few gain stages and even a few feedback loops that are not present that give it an actually, I dare I say, cleaner sound. So it will be interesting to see how people patch it, I think. Being in the Eurorack system, I think it's going to lead to a lot of interesting results.
I agree. When we work on stuff, it's so, I've said this before, it does feel like a band, you know what I mean? Like it feels like we're just there's no rules, and it goes very quickly in directions that we didn't expect it to go. And it's always, I mean, it can get frustrating at times. Sometimes I'm in a bad mood, sometimes he might be in a bad mood, but even those
Me in a bad mood?
but not bad mood, but like, but I think even those behaviors, because now we know each other so well, they inform an approach that is of advantage. Like, for example, Tony sometimes can get hypercritical about things, but that can be used in a very constructive way at the project, because he might not have been catching certain aspects if he weren't that hypercritical.
Yeah.
So if it's taken for what it is, as a tool that we use at the moment. But I think aside from that, it's always very quick. Like, you could be in the middle of a conversation that we have, a creative conversation, and step in 5 minutes later, and it could be a completely different thing. So it's always a very quick flow, and it's great because I don't have that with other people.
And if I could add one thing that I think we both share, and really I think this is a value that I try to keep alive at Make Noise in general, is this idea that there's already so many great electronic musical instruments in the world, and if we're going to make anything else, it's got to be incredible, because there's no sense in just making another delay module.
And also, it's easy to do that, quote unquote, for us, because that sounds pretentious, but we've gone through so many instruments that when you say incredible, there's something that has to blow us away.
Something has to blow us away, right?
So, and there's almost not a pretentious, there's a phase of when we are at the table coming up with stuff that we don't really think about what people are going to think. I mean, that always comes into place. I mean, like with Strega, we looked at each other and went like, this is kind of noisy. Are we going to do this? Or like, there was a conscious realization that there's a company behind this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just, let's do something for us. It is for us, but I don't want to say there was formatting involved, but I think it informed our development, knowing that it was going to be something that other people would enjoy.
Well, because we were going to make more than just two of them.
Right.
And if you're going to make more than just two, you might as well make something that more than just the two of us can use.
Right.
So we were definitely thinking about that.
Yeah. But in general, I think you're right. It's like when we say something that is incredible, it's incredible to us, like something that hasn't been, and it doesn't have to be a concept that is incredible. Sometimes, like for the PT and the Strega, it's a chip that has been used in different applications forever. 40 years probably, 30, 40 years at least, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's 82, 83 maybe, I can't remember.
So a lot of the times it's not about inventing something. It's the ingredients are there, and most of the time it's the recipe itself that we find is informed by our experiences, how we communicate together, and what we think we can bring to the table as far as a new recipe for these ingredients. And so far, I have to say that our way of cooking is fairly relatable by other people. I think that the only time that we had issues is before the stuff gets released, because obviously the internet as an entity has a tendency to be hypercritical, and it's understandable, because obviously all you're doing is absorbing the information through an interface that is not what the instrument is supposed to be.
They haven't played it yet.
Exactly.
But
Simply put, you haven't heard it or played with it yourself.
Yeah.
Either you just read about features, or you saw somebody else's approach to it, which might not be what you would do with it.
For sure.
But that usually gets always erased, once the stuff comes out.
Once people actually have it in hand. There's many documented uses for nearly every IC, every chip, PT, whether it's a PT2399, LM13700, doesn't matter. There's many documented use cases, many pre-existing designs. Mm-hmm. And if you're just going to reiterate one of these pre-existing designs, I don't see a whole lot of purpose in that. That's more what I was trying to say.
I agree.
You have to take those ingredients and do it in a new way. So we're not the first people to use the technology here by a long shot, but we did something a little bit different with it, and so the results can be dramatically different.
Yeah.
Just because something has similar electronics in it doesn't mean that they're going to sound the same or operate the same or get you to the same places. And that is because there's many, many small choices being made by the folks involved in designing it. We were talking about it just last night when you were pointing out an instrument that you were interested in, and I looked and I said, oh, well, it uses the same Curtis chips as the Oberheim stuff from the early 80s, the OB8 and the OBXA, and your response was, yeah, but it doesn't sound like that. Of course not, because
implementation
it's
is
just
different.
Yeah, it's just one IC. It's two ICs amongst thousands of other choices.
Yeah.
Every design, once you reach a certain size at least, has just so many choices that have to be made.
Yeah.
And so even if something has the same parts, it probably doesn't sound the same.
No.
Because of those small changes that incrementally add up to something that's unique.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but we were asking. So on the back of the Brusa, there's some nonsensical drawings. Actually, these are very important. This is actually a map that we discovered to a very special place in Portugal. And if you follow this map, you will find the beating heart of the Brusa. And if you read this phrase at the top, it's a clue as to where the Brusa lie.
The idea about Brusa, the concept of Brusa came from, obviously, Strega is it's an Italian name, and it came, obviously, because I'm Italian, most people know that. But the idea with Brusa is that, I lived in Portugal now for 3 years, I think, or I don't remember exactly, but I think 3 years.
Something like that.
And since obviously comes from the Strega, and as, it's that lineage, I felt, it's always like the hardest part, giving a name, I think, to things like that.
Absolutely, especially at this point.
Yeah, sometimes they come, like with Strega, and sometimes you have to think more about it. So for this, it was more about, okay, I'm in Portugal, and the word Strega in Portuguese is Brusa, and it made sense in a way. It looked good, and then we also found a little saying that I won't translate because I want people to then read it and get to it their own way, in their own time frame. But the concept being that the way that you can read that statement is that no matter how much character a tool can have, at the end of the day, it's you that make it a voice, and the idea that could be extrapolated is that. At the end of the day, you can have all the tools in the world that you think might make you a specific, make you sing or work in a certain way. But at the end of the day, what informs the output and the importance and the value of the output is how personal you can make it. So the tool is just a vessel for everything. And therefore, this is a very strong vessel, but it's still it's still a vessel at the end of the day. So it will be informed by your choices, and that kind of reconnects to the fact that Strega itself is an instrument that lends itself to different interpretations, different sonic outputs according to who's working with it, and the same, even more so, I would think it applies to Brusa, simply because it gets dropped into an environment that it's already more fertile for interactions and for unexpected connections and control and whatnot, which makes it even more exciting.
Right, because now it's being dropped into a unique environment as opposed to living in this environment. This circuit is now being placed into a custom environment because I'm sure there's somebody out there that, and obviously if they had a shared system, potentially they might have a similar environment, although technically speaking, if you were to pull the Echophone out of a shared system and replace it with a Brusa, in my opinion, it's no longer the shared system.
Yeah.
But generally you could say every modular system is a custom environment. And so you're taking this...
Hey, sorry, before you continue, it's not a shared system anymore.
Right.
It's a scared system.
It is. If you put the Brusa in place of the Echophone, you have created the scared system.
Well, now it's documented, so I'm going to have to get a percentage of that.